Now, sexual harassment is a problem all over the world. The Sexual Harassment Bill 2020 of Nigeria seeks to prevent, prohibit, and redress the sexual harassment of people, especially students, in tertiary educational institutions. It is hoped that this bill, when passed into law, would curb all forms of sexual harassment. Well, joining me now to continue our conversation on gender-based violence is Emaluhi Irobe, attorney, gender specialist, and founder, Tribex Lab. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
It's great to be here.
Now, you would recall that in 2016, this bill was brought up, but it was shut down because a lot of persons felt it wasn't totally encompassing. But then some adjustments were made after the documentary that we saw, and then it came up again, and the focus, as it is said, it's to address sexual, gender-based, any form of harassment. But then some are concerned that perhaps it is not all-encompassing at addressing issues of harassment, not just in tertiary institutions, but perhaps across all sectors.
Yes, so the bill specifically is to end sex for grades in universities, and I think that that is where the confusion starts, because the bill that was presented in 2016 was for gender equality in Nigeria, and the Nigerian Senate said, you know, it's a bit against our culture to say men and women are equal. It's a broader conversation than that, but that is the gist of it. So in July 7th in 2020, this sexual harassment bill passed, and it was basically making strict liability for any kind of sex for grades in tertiary institutions.
Absolutely.
And it also was going to criminalize the failure of university authorities to address any complaints of sex for grades. So this bill really is focused on tertiary institutions, and of course we understand the argument that it is not all encompassing, but this is a law specifically for institutions of higher learning.
But then if we are to have something that it is all-encompassing, looking at all sectors, trying to address issues based on sexual and gender-based violence, perhaps what should it look like? Give us a picture of what it should look like.
Well, there is a law in Lagos State, it's a criminal law,
right,
that criminalizes sexual harassment, unwelcome sexual advances, based on if you accept or if you reject, it would affect your job or your education. So there's a law like that already that is covered. But I think what we need is laws that cover different segments, because the university system, in my opinion, is almost like a republic on its own. It runs its own laws and its own properties. But because they have not been prosecuting cases of sex for grades, which is really, really rampant in universities in Nigeria, I think a law focused on that is okay. Now, if there is a law to criminalize gender-based violence, it would have to be a really, really, really long bill. I think there is a lack of understanding of what gender-based violence is anyway, right? So people think gender-based violence is, oh, you punched this woman, or you hit her, or you raped her. But gender-based violence is also like removing opportunities for women. So imagine that you're in university and your professor keeps demanding sex for grades. So that means you keep failing or you keep repeating this course. They are affecting your economic future. So I think a law just for the universities, I think it is perfect.
Now, to something you mentioned, perhaps that's where we should have begun, understanding what gender and sexual-based violence is, because it is totally not properly understood by a lot of persons and a cross-section of the society. So let's break it down and perhaps begin to understand how to address it.
We'll be here for hours.
Just to break it down.
Okay, so gender-based violence is like on this long spectrum. So it can start from like preferring a female child to a male child. I mean, preferring a male to a female, so people want to have boys. So that's where it starts from, to even like household chores. Girls do these things. So girls do home things, they do nurturing things. So that is where the violence starts, because you're starting to marginalize someone. You're starting to set women aside as, this person is weaker. I'm only going to pay for them to go to school till secondary school. After that, they would go get married. So a law and a course, I think, sensitizing the whole of the country to, this is what gender-based violence looks like. For example, you're on the bus, you're on the way to work, on your way home. a man pulls down his pants, or he gropes you on the bus and nobody says anything. That is violence. So yeah, he might not have hit you, you might not be bleeding, but that violation that has occurred from someone touching private parts of your body without your consent, you know, so that's how. And you know, recently there have been reports and videos where women are harassed in public, and nobody helps. But do you know that if you're in public and you just shout "Uli," people would help you? Yes. You know, so I think like there's this need for a mass campaign or a mass training of this is what it looks like.
Educating the public on what it really is.
Yes.
Because recently there was a video of a lady complaining of a guy harassing her in a public vehicle, and persons were like, no, it has nothing to do with you, this is not harassment. But she saw it as that, she understood it, and the others didn't. But then that issue just died down.
Yeah, that's
like
what
that
happens.
But if we are to, because you mentioned that it obviously begins from the home.
Yes.
And that is why it is deeply entrenched with the way it is. So if we are to begin this reorientation of persons in the society, how much of a challenge do you see that being?
It is possible, right? It's a challenge, and I think that would make us feel like we should prepare more. I think it could start from simple things, like even in school, there should be some form of education about men, women, gender norms, gender roles. There should be a way to let people know that you're born female, you're born male, you have equal opportunities and equal access. Somebody should not just already be left behind just because they're a woman or a girl, you know. And I think that the education should start from when you're young, maybe in school, maybe add it to PE classes where you just talk a little bit about these things. But it will be an uphill battle in Nigeria because our society is deeply entrenched in culture and religion, which also contributes to violence against women. And so I think all bodies that are that hold sway over populations, so religious bodies, schools, I think if they take it on to say, let us start to explain what this can look like. Let us start to explain. You don't have to wait till you have a daughter to know that you shouldn't, you know, touch someone inappropriately on the bus. You shouldn't, you know, you would hear men say they've done all these terrible things, but as soon as I have a daughter, I'll protect her. I won't let boys date her. Why? Like, I want to ask them why. So that means you're
asking them already.
Yeah, why, guys? Why? Tell me. You know, so I think getting men really involved also in the education. In my work, I talk with men a lot, and sometimes they feel like, wait, so this scenario you just told me, that person felt violated, so that means I violated people, and they become worried because they didn't even know. Because some of these things are so normalized.
Yes.
And so I think men also understanding that this quest to end gender-based violence is not women versus men.
The battle of the sexes?
Yes, it's not a battle. I think if we look at it as it's all of us against this thing that makes our society less than it can be. Because imagine if, you know, men and women are roughly 50% in population in Nigeria. Imagine if women had even up to half of some of the opportunities that men have. I think our country will be doing much, much, much better. And if people are willing to vote for women. But even for women to run for office, you need a lot of money. So it's such a cyclical thing. But I think the education, mass education. But the irony
is the men ride on the backs of those women.
Yes.
That's this position.
Yes.
In politics. So I'm wondering why it's so much of a challenge when it's the other way for the women. But critical issues that you have pointed out. And another thing, women encouraging women. It's another aspect with regards to this now. We have heard persons say, no, you shouldn't talk about these things. The culture of silence and all of it. How do we deal with it?
We just have to start talking. You know, there's a project that we're running called I Go Talk, which is encouraging students in universities to speak up about sexual violence. So even if you're the first person that says, hey, this person did this to me, that's not okay. Somebody else can be like, oh, they did that to me too. And that is why movements like Me Too, Time's Up have taken traction across the globe. And then on the second part of your question, which is about women encouraging other women, there is a cognitive dissonance, right? So women or older women in society have gone through this discrimination. And then they feel like, well, I've survived it. I'm still here. So you too, you can't do it. I mean, you know, why do you want it easier? But I feel that if you went through a tough time, why do you want someone else to go through a tough time if a solution
I can learn from your experience.
Yes, and so I always urge older women, you know, to start to speak up more, because now there's not that much at stake for them in their careers. You're probably already retired, you're at the top of your career, you may have gone through a lot, like workplace sexual harassment, which is a really big thing here in Nigeria. Right. And still, if you even look at women in leadership positions, maybe heads of banks, heads of companies, women are coming up more, but then there's just only one. And then that one, no one else will get that space or something similar until that person leaves. Even if when you look at boards of directors, mainly it's all men and maybe there's one woman or two women. So if the older people and the older women start saying, you know, my daughters and my nieces and this young kids coming up shouldn't have to go through what I went through, I want to advocate for them. I think that would go a really long way. If we have men saying, okay, enough of all this nonsense that you guys are doing, and older women are saying, we went through that, there's no reason for these young people to go through it. I think that that would make a great deal of change.
And this is something I'd like to talk about. So you mentioned it already, inclusivity,
yes.
Talking about women holding certain positions, occupying certain spaces, that perhaps that will address these issues. So what should women do who find themselves in such spaces? How should they influence
so
laws, policies, because we have found them in the spaces, but not much has changed.
And that's the problem again. It's called tokenization, where you just put one, so that you'll stop complaining. Stop saying there are no women on the boards. Let's just put this one person.
So they can't influence policies?
Well, no, I'm getting there, right? So, but even you, when you are a token, you know. And so how much power does your voice have? Right, so you have to continue to speak up and talk about all of these things, and then when you are in this position, they have to actually make meaningful opportunities for younger people and younger women. But there's also a worry that I'm the only woman here now. I don't want some young person to come and take my place, because that is a real fear, So I think if there's a deeper understanding of like everyone's time comes, and you should make room so that the next people coming behind you, it's easier and their jobs are more effective. Because it's a continuous battle. I mean, we hope that gender-based violence will end by 2030, but...
Oh, are you positive that that will happen?
I don't think...
We've seen the launch of the barometer and all of it.
I've been working in the gender space for a while. There is progress being made, but 2030 is really like tomorrow. And one of the big things we need to understand is that the way people think is that's their thought pattern, their experience is what they take when they're going to do legislation. And so if we don't change the way people think about women in society and what their role is, or what can a woman do now, weak woman, or whatever, all of those things, we would miss out on a great deal. Yeah.
Very, very important. How about the road to justice for a lot of the victims? Do you see that playing a major role perhaps towards ending or bringing it to the barest minimum, this issue of sexual-based violence against women, because that aspect is something that is a source of worry for a lot of persons?
Yes, I totally understand and empathize with victims, especially in Nigeria, because access to justice, there's so many obstacles, and because there's so many loopholes in the system, even for the people who are brave enough to speak up or to report, the experience they have even with law enforcement in trying to get justice is also doubly traumatizing. And so that's why I would say again that even teaching law enforcement what gender-based violence looks like, what sexual violence looks like, because you would hear stories that you report a case of like domestic violence in the home and the police send you back and say, na family matter. So now you went to report, they sent you back, and you're going back to the house where they were beating you. The other people that have witnessed this and they've seen nothing happened, why would they feel deterred from doing it? And so access to justice is really, really important, because it will encourage other survivors to speak up, to say, me too, and this happened. And it will serve as a deterrent to prevent gender-based violence in the first place. Because now when you understand what it looks like, you know that you will be punished, and you know that victims are going to talk. If you do anything to them, then you will stop.
So what are the gaps you think that we need to perhaps begin to bridge? You talked about the fact that we are gaining traction. So what more can we be building on to gain more traction as we inch closer to 2030?
Well, I think first of all, women's movements, whether led by women or other groups, need more funding to penetrate more. More people need to know. I think that there's such a huge knowledge gap. So an education campaign about even women provide violence against other women. It happens quite a lot because sometimes they also don't even know that this is a form of violence. This is a form of taking opportunity from someone, or this is a way of reducing their ease of life.
Right.
So a huge education campaign is needed, funding obviously for these movements, and support for movements trying to raise women to run for office, especially in Nigeria. Because when your attitude and the way you think about women and their role, for example, if someone thinks, oh, this road is always bad, I'm never going to pass it. And so for years, you never passed it. You didn't know that they've renovated it, they've done all of these things. You never get the benefit of it. So education campaign, funding, and collaborative efforts between men and women to say, okay, it's not battle of the sexes. It's not women versus men. It's not a fight. Not all men are bad.
We just
not
want
all
the
women.
society to be better.
It's all of us
Right.
on a group against this system of oppression.
Right, we'll leave the conversation here now. Emalohi Irobe, attorney, gender specialist, and founder, Tribex Lab. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.